Thank you very much, Jan. The floor is open to questions from anyone, either in Japan or from here. Would anyone have any questions or
Please
comments?
Yeah, maybe I'll just ask some comments and questions. Thank you very much. I'm very new in this field. My area is economics and migration, so it's entirely out of my. So forgive me if I'm giving maybe some senseless questions. But first, I was really wondering about the role that the government should have in this kind of resettlement. You're mentioning that it should just be one actor. But then later on, you mentioned that well, it should also be act as a police. So, well, as an actor, it can be a very strong actor or a very weak actor. So, to what extent can the state, and also in terms of this state or nation, you have in the Philippines, you have the national state, and also the regional concerns and state. So, maybe you can also tell us more about this, how strong should the state be in this kind of settlement? And also, finally, I really wonder what international actors should do, or what's the role of the international actors in this kind of settlement, because just an idea, maybe the nation can be an actor and just the actor, and then the police can be the international, like TKO or something else. So it cannot necessarily be the double function of the government in this kind of settlement. So just the role of the government as an actor, only as an actor, and also the role of the international actors in this political
Well, these are indeed key questions. I'm not sure if I'm able to answer them well sufficiently, but well, we're still learning on this, I guess. The important thing is the concept of political settlements, that it's more like really an analytical tool, and it's more the result of the analysis that the state actor there is just one of many actors. So you have to deal. The important thing, I guess, is that states have to learn to deal with being just one among others in that game. And of course, well, how should they deal with negotiations? I guess in the Philippine case, I've heard already, but we did not. I have to say that I have not enough information about this still. We're learning on that. That in the case of the Negros agreement and also at the Cordilleras and also with the RPA negotiations, local negotiations proved to be quite successful. So the farther you go down the government levels, and you have, I guess, 5 government levels at the moment. It's the regional governments down there. The farther down you go, the better the chances that you have a good connection to what is going on around. So the important thing is that states have to learn in these negotiations to limit themselves in a certain way, and they have to learn also that they have to work for their legitimacy. So it's not a given that it's not like they're doing a favor by giving a treaty away, and this is still an approach which is quite often in the mindsets. Not particularly here, but in Colombia, it's quite often it comes from this. Well, we are the state. We are now giving them the chance to negotiate with us, and this is not really well an expression of what the real settlement on the ground is like. This is also where the role of international actors can come in. There are certain points here. The funny thing is that many of these international actors are doing quite a lot of analysis before they engage, and they're always trying to be very cautious about these processes in the beginning. but it's then weird sometimes how things change. For example, I read before coming here again through the reports of the International Crisis Group on the Philippines in the last 2 years. They produced 3 substantial reports. And the funny thing is that the first report, I now learned, by the way, that they somehow dissolved their Philippine chapter in Singapore, I guess, so they are not going to produce anymore in the upcoming future. But they produced 3 papers, and the first one was a very intriguing one on the local conflicts and the local settlements in Mindanao, with the case studies Pospisil and so on. Well, then they produced, the last one they produced was then on the MILF framework agreement, and then they were completely optimistic about this whole issue of the local contexts of the very complex Mindanao politics. It certainly went out there. It wasn't there at this paper anymore. So they were very suddenly completely optimistic since this framework agreement was signed. They were so happy that this was signed that this whole thing that analysis did before, which is the proof very relevant now, it's just vanished something. And this is, I guess, the case with many, especially with the non-governmental actors around, that at the moment when a peace process starts, they get so subscribed to this, and so happy that this now suddenly starts moving, and this is so good that they are only getting all the precautions and all the analysis they did before, when I guess their role would be to remind all the actors about the problems which are. So this is of course a very one point here. Another point, and this I guess you raised very, very rightly, is that in some cases it might really be better if there is something like PKK or UN actors coming in. Of course, this is especially in Sudan before the split, it would not have been possible to have this kind of independence of South Sudan without the United Nations being present with a really large scale mission, 10,000 plus people there, and they are also more or less in the form guaranteeing what is not really peace, but at least some status quo, which wouldn't be able, of course, suddenly use these forces to maintain. So there is, of course, a very important role in that. But of course, in conflicts like in the Philippines or especially in Colombia, there is not really this possibility, because there is the problem that this would also be for the government a point which they don't like to have some foreign police forces on the ground there. This is not what would make them happy if the conflict, because then they would acknowledge that the conflict has a certain level where they are not able to control it any longer, and they're not happy with that. So there is a problem you have to deal with. Yeah, it's of course not sufficient to answer, because this is our big questions, basically what I'm working on myself.
I'm curious about, so you presented the context in the Philippines, Colombia, and Sudan. Did you notice if there were any trends that they were leaning towards international actors versus local ones in terms of being inclusive? Which ones are they giving more attention to or giving more importance? Like, do they focus on the international actors or the local actors? Which countries do you find any trends in?
Trends? Well, trends in what exactly? Or
For example, in Sudan,
Yeah.
they give more focus on, or give more attention to the international actors.
in our research?
Yes, in your research. Yes.
In our research. No, what we did is focusing on the peace processes themselves. So of course there are international actors present in all cases. You have Sudan, and of course with actors which are trying to facilitate the negotiations. You have that here with the international contact group. Now for just the Mindanao case, Malaysia is the head here, and you have it also Colombia with Norway, and then Cuba very much trying to facilitate the recent negotiation process. And this has been the case on the other processes before. But we tried mainly to focus on the actors, the conflict actors, so on the governments which were negotiating the administrations, and on the other hand on the Senate groups, which were part of the states of the treaty. So the main documents we use for the comparison are the treaties themselves plus the statements of the treaties by the actors. Of course, we put the other things into account.
Questions? Yes.
Sorry about that. Can you expand a little bit on your second conclusion regarding the limited but certain usefulness, especially in regard to SSR and PDR?
Yeah.
And
Okay. Well, I mean here, particularly, perhaps you come across this PCIA term, which is more or less used for organic development actors when judging or dealing with their impact or assessing their impact of interventions in conflict environments. It's peace and conflict impact analysis. So that's what this PCIA is. This is well, a certain tool which is focusing on the one hand, they're trying to find out root causes and trigger factors, and then what actors are around, which are connecting factors between these actors, which are dividing factors, and then they try to decide how the intervention is dealing with these connecting factors, dividing factors, and trying to find this related to that. So this is a very formal way, and also, in my opinion, a very static way of doing analysis. What the concept of political settlements could offer here is that you have a more dynamic, interrelated feature, which is also getting a bit beyond the picture that PCIA often has, and it's just focusing on the beneficiaries of concrete intervention. Quite often leaves out, well, those who are not directly but indirectly tackled by such interventions. So people, for example, who might not be very happy that this community gets that, my community doesn't get that, and all these. And these are dynamic processes, strong interrelations. Here this concept might offer something, because you have to, from the very beginning, this informal negotiation process you have to take this into account, and you have to identify what are the key factors, how they are perceiving each other, how my intervention will fit in this complete picture, and not just doing your PCIA sheet where you go through the making money, all these things. So this is a very, I think, as I've come across, especially in the development community, they're doing this quite static with these especially in these systems. But also in the beginning, of course, I thought about this exactly with the Asian Foundation, because they somehow brought this concept in their work. They are not using it at the moment in designing their interventions, because they're following a quite big sheet with 6 intervention lines. One of these is SSR, one of these is PDR, and some others. But I think it could, well, they have to have their own experiences with that, because they started this program right now. I could think of better ways of designing the main lines of intervention, a better way than just see, okay, what is missing with PDR, with SSR, and what is the other one. The other actor, so we engage in that. So it could prove value in overcoming this very static way of designing intervention strategies and assessing this one.
You mentioned about the importance of legitimacy in getting the state working on having legitimacy on the ground. And how does it relate to political settlements, particularly in designing interventions such as DDR, SSR, disarmament? Because you need to have legitimacy on the ground in order for these people to give up their arms.
Yeah.
So how does these things relate to each other?
This is one of the big advantages Sudan has to a certain extent, because there the UN was present. This is what we had dealing with the question with the international actors. This is, of course, in a way easier if you have huge international actors on the ground there. International, I mean multilateral actors, because then you have, of course, mainly the disarmament component is part. Most of the treaty is part of the national armies. Even the groups themselves select their weapons. But then with demobilization and integration and reintegration, then the international factor comes in. This is mostly a very important point in giving this whole process international legitimacy. So it's far easier if you know, okay, there is the UN behind that, so a one-way process is very important to join. But the disarmament should be with the actors themselves, of course. It's very difficult here, not, it would be a very difficult process if the Philippine army starts to collect weapons in certain parts of Mindanao. At least not very successfully. They tried to do that in certain parts of Sudan. They had also some things like that. I noticed in Uganda, you have experiences all over the ground, also in Colombia. You have the people giving you weapons because you're mostly buying them. You're giving them, $100 for AK-47. Yeah, you get this AK-47, but okay, you use the $100 to buy better for AK-47 next year. So you have this experience. This happens quite regularly, actually. So of course, this disarmament has to be with the actors themselves. Most of the cases. If this is not the case, then it's not genuine. We know that. And then, of course, it helps if you have powerful international commitment behind any kinds of reintegration. Because reintegration is to make a break point. It's very difficult because in most of the cases, and it's also here, integrate people into what? This is often the main problem here. You have came across if you check the South Sudan, it's just ridiculous. To reintegrate people into what? There's nothing there to reintegrate people. So and this problem, of course, needs to be solved because not anybody can join the army or the police force, which is the quite regular way, because then you have at least 1,000 competents away, put them to military and pay them something. Okay. But if you transform them into civil life, it's difficult. And of course, this is I guess it helps very much to have international money in there, not only for having the money, but also to have the commitment shown behind this. Of course, this is very difficult.
Questions from here or from Japan? What about the problem of, for a rebel group or for anti-government group to work out, they would have to have sources of money and sources of arms. So, is there a way of buying out the guns is one thing, but stopping the flow of weapons and stopping the flow of money to allow them to buy is something else?
This is one of the points behind this concept of resettlement. In fact, this Alex de Waal, I've showed this shortly at the beginning. He had this concept of political marketplace, and he used this in the context of Sudan. And he was writing about his experiences in peace negotiations in Sudan, and this was just more or less a negotiation about a certain price, a concrete amount of money, which would be necessary to accommodate those which would then happy and stop fighting. It's just a matter of a certain price level that you can raise. If you say the government, okay, you know what, you get, well, free costs in government, with secretary here and minister here, and then you get regional development campaign, which has this number of money here, some number of dollars here, and then, okay, they say, okay, well, we'll last and stop fighting. This happened, really, for real, on the ground. And of course, negotiations are always dealing with this kind of aspect, how much you benefit from this. And most probably, this is what lies behind this concept, you won't get peace negotiations off the ground if you're not able to offer a viable economic perspective. If they will be better off financially with fighting than with fighting. Actually, most probably. It's all in all this context is proven, and this is also a part of the problems you have with the bandas criminales in Colombia, especially in the Medellin area, areas around that. That they are simply better off dealing drugs, money than that. They have the weapons at their disposal anyhow, so what you put them offer, they're better off. And there is no short-term solution to that problem with whatever treaty. And of course, this is it's not always the case, because for groups which has or who have a long-standing political record, like for example, FAR. Also, you can argue, of course, with MIL a very long tradition, or the UPA, CPP. Then this, of course, there are political issues at stake, very much. And you can offer, by taking them seriously into account, you can offer something. But this other aspect is still very important. You have to accommodate it. This is the thing where you have to open or somehow resettle such settlements, because you should be able to accommodate the elites behind that, and they have then to accommodate their own constituencies, because otherwise it won't work. You have also the problem, this is, by the way, this is one of the weird points in terms of international assistance, because you have then very strict anti-corruption campaigns coming along, post-conflict measures there. And this is somehow weird, because in some cases this just cuts off elites from their constituencies away, because this happens, of course, by ways what we call one way or another corruption. But you need this corruption, otherwise the people say, okay, why we should support you in joining such settlements here or treaties, because what's our benefit then? If you then say, okay, we cannot be corrupt anymore, so go to some formal procedures. So this is an issue. Might sound weird, but this is really an issue. I'm able, because this is a very complex question.
Earlier you talked about the high variability of state positions depending on different administrations. What's the same thing for the other side?
This is indeed an interesting question, because I rarely come across this case actually. They have, the thing is that they all are, well, it's one characteristic of non-state armed groups, they're not very democratic in a way. They have more or less the same leadership since years and years and years. But of course you have, if you take for example MNLF, you have very different approaches to negotiations depending on what split now we talk about. You have MNLF factions in the government, you have MNLF sections having negotiations in Western now, so you have of course their differences. But in most of the cases, well, the leadership is of very high continuity in most of these groups. Even if the leadership is killed, there are have processes where there is no leadership. You have, but if you take, for example, the SPLA in Sudan, you had this change. John Garang, the charismatic leader of the South Sudanese independence movement, killed, and he had some kind of what he called the New Sudan vision. So vision for a united New Sudan, democratic, in a certain other way, and this translated very much into the comprehensive peace agreement in the constitution, which was basically set in the CPA. If you read through this, it's remarkable. If you read through the CPA, the comprehensive peace agreement between the Sudanese government and the SPLA, it's basically its constitution. It said, okay, who is getting elected, for what terms, how many ministers here, and so on. This changed completely with the stat. This is definitely 2005. And the new leadership, which was then going for independence, basically, and this is all over Trump, and they were very important and involved in the CPA or the constitution state. They were just interested in when is the election of independence. So, but otherwise, in most of the groups here have very high continuity in terms of leadership.
You refer to state as primus inter pares among actors in peace processes, part of the dual role of the state. Question is, what gives the state that status? Specifically, does the state's ability to threaten elimination of the other party using the repressive state apparatus empirically mean anything in the ability of the state and the other parties to come up with a political settlement?
As for the political settlement, it's more or less something which is already there. You have it anyway, so it's not the choice of the state to create something or not. The choice of the state is to what extent you formalize or how do you try to transform by your own actions this association process. Because there is the ability to transform, of course. There is not, unless this is often the misjudgment of the world, is that there's not ability to bring something completely else into place from certain periods of time. You just can't transform what is on the ground. And you are part of this process. So what is impossible for us to do? The problem is, of course, and this is what you mentioned, there is a certain attractiveness to rely on the means you're used to use for years and years. So you come up with repression, you come up with corruption. These are the two avenues which are traditional there. But the problem is, and this is then to a certain point when a peace negotiation comes up, it somehow proves that this readiness for a negotiation, this proves that these means are a certain end. You cannot repress and cope for as long as you like. Perhaps you can, but it might be more reasonable, even from an economic standpoint, to try something else. This is quite often the entry point for peace negotiations. If you take, I guess in Colombia they could fight this for years and years and years, and both actors now talking about the Colombian government and the FARC, they could sustain that for years, for decades, with all the drug money in the country. I wouldn't see that as a huge problem for both actors to sustain that for years. But it might be a more reasonable option to try another avenue for both. So it's always the negotiation part. But again, then this factor comes in place. You have to offer some real benefit also for once in a while.
I'm just curious, what led you to, what made you decide on the three countries, Colombia, Sudan, because there are other, of course, Sri Lanka.
Actually, I spent 4 months in Sri Lanka studying conflict there, so I know Sri Lanka very well. But well, on these three countries, this has of course a certain history, which is also based on my personal development, because I started studying Colombia and Philippines in 2004, I guess, and Sudan in 2007 or so, and Sudan was due to the necessities of also Austrian official actors, because we have to do some policy research in our work also in our institute, since we are more of a think tank, and there was a certain necessity to get engaged in Sudan, so I did that basically. They were paying for some tips, so this is quite nice. But now from the perspective of our problem with this problem of peace, conflict situations where multiple actors involved, these are basically the main case studies if you look around the world. You don't have so many countries where there are 3, 4 really strong armed groups in present. It's really, if you look around, there are not so many more. Sudan, of course, there are, if you count all the full splits, you have 23. But there are 2, 3 really strong. You have here at least 3 quite strong groups, and you have in Colombia some of them. So if you, in terms of that research problem, these are basically the obvious case studies. But of course, this is also rooted in our research experience, because it can come historically out of research on security and development. And there were also those 2 countries in the beginning very important for campaigns by international development actors, how to try new avenues dealing with work in conflict, how to do development work in conflict, and there was certain programs here were in place, also in Colombia, and this is why we came to this conflict. The funny thing is that Colombia and the Philippines are in a way, being there, quite similar. It's very nice to be both.
That's much. We don't have that much time.
That's true. That's true. That's actually true. That's a huge difference. In Colombia, there might be more money in That's really but this is really a ridiculous point. This money in some parts of Colombia, if you go to Medellin, you have green belts, but in really different scales because of the government. It's just with lots of shops, nobody can buy anything. Nobody. Even come from here with double price because of just the need to earn money for the abortion.
Other questions? Any from?
I was just wondering, you mentioned that there's a great continuity in the rebel side because yet with the political side, you mentioned that there was no continuity between the different presidents, for example, in Colombia. Is this perhaps part of the problem that you have one side that has expectations for better things, and yet you have the political side coming up with different negotiations each time on occasion?
This is exactly the point. This is the problem I mentioned before with that it seems like they're basically a no-brainer that every treaty has some relevance for upcoming negotiations, and still the government side is very surprised if some things from 1990 something come up in the negotiations. This is because of this discontinuity, because the problem is also that especially in Colombia, they're not just changing one president, they're changing really parts of the administration there. I guess it's here now so different in certain ways, it's even more, but this is really the problem. This is really, you have to solve that. That might be one of the points why constitutional changes proved for these, in the M19 case, proved to be so successful. Because they really proved the willingness of the given government at that time, that they were willing to change constitution, to bring them into a formal game, and then they were part of the game. To bring them into the game, in the formal political game, as soon as possible, and then you force the rebel side also to take part in this political democratic game, also in their own setup, which is then part of their mind. So this is exactly.
So if you have a framework like that, then you can go on to become more inclusive rather than exclusive.
Yes.
I was just wondering, so according to your presentation, political settlement is a fairly new concept. So do the negotiators know that it's such? Are they aware of this concept?
No, it's fairly new because it's of course based on concepts which are quite older with Joe Nickman. And the funny thing is that this is now and ongoing mainly now with documents from World Bank, from the Development Assistance Committee, so from the international side, more or less from multilateral actors. They quote MGDA quite a lot in the recent years, and this concept of political settlement is also becoming very much into the mix of concepts which are around, as I've quoted the Asian Foundation here. So at least some of the international actors are well aware, especially on the technical side, of these issues. But the important for me is the certain way of thinking, and here, at least on the multilateral level, the way states are perceived, and then of course such negotiation processes are perceived, is changing quite a lot in recent years. So I would say that this perspective that we have to deal with legitimacy issues in a kind of very different ways than we did before, I guess this is there on this kind of thing. So they are aware of this, but of course not so much on this concrete concept, which is very much a LC thing, and which is very much now within, of course, the Development Assistance Committee, but just on the more technical side of things. But as said, if you're an actor really in the negotiations, then you're doing tactics and or anything else, because you know the situation. It's more of you are prepared research agenda or you have really technical problems, so then it might be a few more.
Other questions or comments?
Thank you for your great presentation, very interesting. And I have one question. You compared three countries, Colombia, Peru, Venezuela, and the situation is very different. But I think there are some similarities and there are some implications you got just after compare these three countries. Maybe it can reflect the other countries. Do you have some implications kind of that?
Well, we are not really, the problem is we are not really at that point with what we're doing right now, but of course I've thought a lot about, because I've been there quite a time, about Sri Lanka, where you have also, you have the funny thing here that in me now they're talking a lot about this three people concept in a way, but the three people around now Islam and the Christian side. You had the very same thing in Sri Lanka with the thing about Buddhist Sinhalese side, you have the Tamil side, you have the Muslims also in the eastern part of the country in Sri Lanka there. And there would be one indication that at a certain point I'm not really sure of whether this concept really proves helpful in the long run, because you're shaping so much in terms of identity that it might be really causing long-term problems in the sense that you even have to subscribe to one of these identities to get some kind of regard. So what if you are now married then a Christian to Muslim, and then you have a child, what not to do with these identities? And this would be perhaps a quite promising way forward. So this would be one of the consequences thinking in other countries, because I was reminded on Sri Lanka quite a lot. Sri Lanka does not prove to be, they chose really the military solution in the conflict, and it proves to be a very difficult situation for a really long time to go. And would be of course helpful also great to learn for here from that also. So of course I'm trying to figure out, but we haven't done that in a systematic way.
You also mentioned about more comparative, because as you're coming up with, it becomes more interesting if you see more of these instances and do more comparative work. Is there any agency or governments actually listening to each other in this respect? Because alright, you're in the academe, people discuss, but do countries actually listen to the experiences of other countries? And so in a way, the negotiators listen to this kind of presentation.
Yeah, I mean, now from my own experience, I think you have certain ways of influencing what governments will do. The unfortunate thing in my case is that the Austrian government decided for some reason or the other to stop its negotiation activities, which they had very much in the 1970s, parts of the 1980s. So we are kind of limited, but of course what I'm doing as part of my work is consulting government agencies. So I'm consulting the Austrian Development Association Agency, also the Ministry of Defense, and they are listening. They are, of course, this is a very creepy process, as it's always called, so it's kind of really difficult. But of course, I try to do that, and it's always we try, of course, if you make interviews in the countries, we always try to talk, of course, also with government agencies there. It's always they are listening. If you, for example, the presentations I saw at the last Friday meeting here at the university quite a lot elaborated, and I guess it's part of the work, especially for example in the case of the Philippines, it's part of your work, your institute, that this is so much in the negotiations, this kind of thing. And this is very important point. Of course, I think there is. It's not really just in the public. If you try to reach out in the consultancy realm, if you have to do that all the time, it's perhaps sometimes well, it's not always that productive experience, but it's necessary. So, and I guess you have to. So I hope that this helps me in giving some kind of meaningful advice to government people I work with in Austria. I hope this helps you also.
So it's just about time. It's 4 o'clock, almost 4 o'clock Philippine time. It's almost 5 o'clock Japan time. So I think it's just about time that we can wrap this up. I would like to, on that note, I think that it's quite positive note that we can make an impact in our own way. And so I hope all of us have learned something from this afternoon's presentation. I know we've recorded it and we're putting this on the web, made available. It's on the website. Look at it later on. So on behalf of Federal Studies, on behalf of Ryukoku University, and on behalf of all our partners here, thank you very much for participating in this session. Thank you very much, Jan, for being here. And also thank you very much for the technical staff who are with us here. And thank you and good day. Hope to see you next time.
ありがとうございました。
また会いましょう。Okay? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.